Hi, welcome to this AQA A-Level Business revision video focusing on 3.3.4, making marketing decisions. We're going to be looking at place today as part of the marketing mix, and we're going to separate out into two sections: the actual location where you choose to do business and then distribution channels. A quick reminder that my teaching here is separate from my teaching and consultation roles in and around the country in any schools or academies. My name's Mr. Giles. Let's get down to business. We'll first remind ourselves that the marketing mix is a working document or plan that the business will adjust over time. Place is probably one of the trickiest parts of the marketing mix to change, but it can have quite a significant impact on how successful your marketing strategy is. Let's have a look first at the physical characteristics. Now, I shouldn't really say physical characteristics because that's actually part of the extended marketing mix. But what I mean is the physical location that you choose to do business. Now, you might be thinking, well, how exactly is that marketing? But if we go back to the very first video about marketing, we remind ourselves that marketing is the communication between customers and the business. So where you choose to locate does tell a bit of a story to the people who come to shop there. So I've got a list here of things that has to be considered when choosing a location. Some of these have more of an impact on that communication than others. The first is the cost, the rent, the mortgage of that physical building. Now, that ties in quite nicely down here with socio-economic status. If you've got a shop or a location, say in Chelsea, in London, the cost of the rent of that is going to be very, very high, but it's also in a place with a, quite high socio-economic standard. So we're talking maybe middle class, upper middle class. So that does tell a story to the customers, because if you go to a shop in Chelsea, subconsciously you know that that is a high class area, if that's appropriate to say. So that's the first consideration. Up next, we've got footfall. Is your business in a location that has significant footfall, i.e. there are lots of people walking around it? Now, if that's appropriate for your business, then that might be a good thing. If you're a shop or a supermarket of some description, you want to be near where people are going to just pop in and see it. However, there might be something to be said about putting your business somewhere where there isn't a lot of footfall, if you want to create exclusivity, for example. So let's say you run a hotel of some description that's quite high priced and luxurious, and you don't want people just wandering across or wandering around. You might choose to locate it somewhere off the beaten track a little bit so that people have to come and find it and explore to find it rather than just bump into it. Again, it depends on what marketing message you're trying to get across. Up next, we've got proximity to customers and, to a certain extent, suppliers. How close you are to your customers will depend on whether or not that is appropriate and whether your business actually needs to be doing that. But again, that tells the customers what you want them to know. If your business is amongst your customers, i.e. it's quite on top of them and it's a part of their day-to-day life, then that sends a particular message to them that you're a part of their community, for example. So a business that does that would be a hairdressers or a barbers, for example. They're generally within the communities. Whereas if you're a business that, say, that's a little bit further away, maybe something like a theme park, then that's less to be doing with the actual community and more to do with maybe a national picture. So you think about Chessington, Alton Towers, places like that, oftentimes, unless you live in those areas, you have to travel to them. Transport links. What transport links do you offer to your location? Now, if you're part of, say, a big shopping centre, there's probably great shopping links or transport links, I should say. But maybe you need separate transport links that are exclusive to your business. So if you've got a particular business that you run, that it might need its own train stop or its own bus stop or something like that, that you can integrate into it. In the local area where I live, we have Lakeside Shopping Centre that has its own train station. Now, it's part of a town as well, but ideally, that train station is actually designed more for the shopping centre than it probably is, say, the local area. And then lastly, we've talked about socio-economic status. That's a mouthful. Socio-economic status. That is essentially an old-fashioned way of describing certain areas, and it is very old-fashioned, folks, and it could be considered somewhat inappropriate, but it's still worth a consideration. I'm going to give an example here. One of my... is he a friend? Yeah, let's call him a friend. One of my friends wanted to buy a Porsche, and we were having this conversation, and I said, well, where is the local Porsche dealership? Because I certainly don't know. Now, I come from very humble beginnings. I lived in a very working class town. So we had a lot of Dagenham Fords. Okay, that's where I'm from, Dagenham. A lot of Fords. Okay, so I was like, well, where's the Porsche dealership? And as it turns out, it's right next to City Airport. And I said to him, that's interesting, because I wouldn't have pegged that as being a very rich area. That's not a socio-economically upstanding area. Okay, It's just another area, really. But he pointed out that it's right next to City Airport, which is used quite frequently by people who travel for business, etc., etc. So he said, actually, it kind of works there, doesn't it? Because they're bringing money to that area, and people do live close to City Airport for that reason. So I found that quite interesting. And then when I think about, well, hang on, where do we find things like betting shops? Well, I don't know if they've got them in Chelsea, if you see where I'm going with this. Okay, but we certainly had lots of them in Dagenham. So that socioeconomic status is somewhat important to the choice of location. So when you're picking your place where you're actually going to do business, where you're going to put your shop or your service, these are the considerations you have to make. There's literally no point putting a Poundland in Kensington, for example. Let's have a look at channels distribution. So the next part of place under the marketing mix that we have to consider is how are we actually going to get our products to our customers, okay, or services. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of channels distribution. These are just some examples. But when we talk about those channels, we are literally talking about how does the product and or service go from the people that are producing it to the people who are consuming it. And there are many routes. Now, there's two bits of key knowledge or key facts I want you to know, or keywords, I should say. The first one is brick and mortar. Okay, so brick and mortar is an actual shop, store, location. Okay, not all businesses have brick and mortar locations. So we've got brick and mortar, and then we've got e-commerce. So we all know about e-commerce, online of some description. Now, some businesses only have brick and mortar. Some businesses only have e-commerce. Some businesses have both. They would be considered multi-channel. Okay, so for example, you can order from, let's go with Sports Direct. You can order online, but you can also visit one of their stores. Whereas Primark, for example, now that's probably slightly less true now because I think they've started selling online. But for the longest time, Primark was only brick and mortar, and then Boohoo was only online. Got the idea? So, how do we get our products to our consumer? Let me just have a little kind of spin through these with you, see if you can kind of grasp them. The first channel distribution we're looking at here is producer straight to consumer. Now, as you can imagine, this cuts out what we like to call like the middlemen, okay? The people in the middle of the channels. And what that does is it allows a producer to soak up the maximum amount of revenue and profit because they can sell it at the retail price. However, that's not going to help you if you have lots and lots of customers and only one place where you produce things. My favorite example of this would be like private jets or yachts. Because if you're going to buy a private jet, you'll probably go straight to the producers of private jets, order directly through them, deal with them, they make your jet and you go and pick it up. So it's probably how that goes down. But then how many private jets are sold each year? I don't know, not many, I should imagine. Okay, so producer to consumer. This could be, though, a service-based barber. So the producer is the barber or the hairdresser, the consumer is you. You go to the shop, you sit down, you get your hair cut, done. So it's a very quick channel of distribution. I wouldn't want to get a haircut in any other way. I don't want anybody else involved in my haircut, if I'm perfectly honest. So that makes a bit of sense. The next one down is producer, wholesaler, retailer, and then consumer. So if we work from this side, the producer is obviously the person who produces the products. A wholesaler is a type of business that buys products from multiple producers in massive bulk. They then break the bulk, that's important, they break the bulk into smaller manageable units. They then sell to retailers, which are shops, okay? And those shops then sell them to the consumers. That is a very traditional way of doing business, okay? So if you think about your local sweet shop, they've gone to a wholesalers of some description. They're often called a cash and carry. Now, you might know Costco because we as consumers can go to Costco. That is a wholesaler to a certain extent, but we're talking about the ones that you're not allowed to go to unless you are a registered business. So producer, they make the goods. Wholesaler, they buy up goods from maybe 100 different producers, and they have them in their warehouses in massive bulk, break them down into boxes or crates, and then allow retailers to come along with their their transit van, load up their transit van with crates of stuff and move on with their life. So the consumer can then buy one unit. So that channel distribution is quite traditional. Now, again, that tells a particular story. If you can buy from a retailer who's bought it from a wholesaler, so on and so forth, then that's probably not an exclusive product. That's an everyday product. So then if we then link that to, say, our pricing strategies, that's probably not going to have a premium price. And then the last one, which is a bit of an old-fashioned one, is the concept of having an agent in the middle. Now, when I say agent, I want you to think estate agent. That's what you need to think of. So you have the producers, i.e. the people who build houses. The people who sell houses are estate agents, and the people who buy houses are consumers. So it's that old-fashioned way of doing it. Now, think about an insurance agent. Okay. Now, when you get your car insurance, you call them a broker because they broker a deal between you and the person or company, sorry, I should say, that underwrites your insurance. So when you get car insurance with, say, Direct Line, it's not Direct Line that's insuring you, it's the underwriters. It's a whole nother business somewhere, probably in London, that's providing you with that insurance. And they simply broker the deal. That's that situation there. Because for a underwriters to try and sell insurance, they would require a whole nother team, which they don't want to do. They want to leave that to people like, the Meerkats and Direct Line. But again, that tells you a certain story. Now, if you want, I only know this, there's a funny story why I know this, but I won't tell you why. But if you want, say, nautical insurance, or you want to insure a boat, there are brokers that do that for sure, but they're very minimal. But it's mostly producer to consumer. So if you want nautical insurance, you'll go straight to the underwriters. They're up at Lloyd's of London. Okay, so that's a very different kind of distribution channel. But then that leads to the price being very, very high, the premium nature of it. Whereas me and you going on to Meerkat Market and doing our comparison, blah blah blah, isn't very exclusive. Okay, and the main marketing driver there would be price, wouldn't it? Okay, so these all link to the other parts of the marketing mix. Hopefully you're getting the gist of that. So that's place under the marketing mix. Two considerations to make: where you're actually going to put your location, and then the channels distribution from yourself to the consumers themselves. And then these channels distribution obviously can then be either brick and mortar, or they can be delivered on online via your DPDs, etc. And then again, that just tells a particular story. If you have any questions or any comments, put them down below and I'll try and answer them as quick as I can. You stay safe and I'll see you in the next one.